It has always been my conviction that a sermon should do more than just stir a person. I would hate to think that I had spent hours and hours preparing a sermon just to move you. No, most preachers don't just aim to stir and to move. They aim to say something that will motivate you to change. I was confronted with my own belief system about a year ago when my wife and I were watching a W5 documentary on the Ukraine. It was about a lot of things. It was about 100,000 orphans abandoned by their parents, left to government institutions. And many don't even have access to that and are left on the streets to fend for themselves. There were several other things that the documentary was about, including Ukraine's contribution to the sex trade worldwide. My wife and I were left so moved and stirred in our hearts by what was going on in Ukraine, especially since my wife has family ties to Ukraine. But even while I was having this emotional response, I felt God speaking to me, and it felt like it was louder than the television set. How dare you expect people to be changed by your sermons when you yourself refuse to do anything when I stir you about the needs of the world? And I was just trying to enjoy the TV show. So we contacted a few people and finally spoke to the POC missionary in the area who told us about what was going on in Ukraine and how our church might be able to help. One thing led to another, and we ended up going to see for ourselves. And while we were there, we visited the Bible college in a city called Lviv, which is in western Ukraine, and realized that perhaps God could use us to meet some of the needs that we saw there. During our visit, we also met a young man of about 25 years old at the time. He was a typical example of a young man with the call of God in his life, who was involved in his local church, but whose dream it was to eventually go to Bible school and train to be in full-time ministry. Well, circumstances and people kept discouraging him from even trying to reach his goal. There are many reasons for this. Suffice it to say now that Christians in Ukraine during communism were barred from higher learning, and so there's this attitude that developed in the church that you didn't need an education to be a pastor. When communism fell in 1991, it was estimated that 90% of all church leaders had not received any kind of ministry training at all. 15 years later, there are still many pastors who discourage formal education when it comes to ministry in the Bible. Unfortunately, this young man got a lot of these discouraging words from his pastor and his church, and so kept putting off his dream of attending Bible college. We were so inspired and saddened at the same time by his story that we came back to Canada determined to help him in some way. We thought, wouldn't it be great if we were able to pay for his Bible college training? For Ukrainians, it's quite expensive, but for us, it's really not that difficult. About a month after we came back from our trip to Ukraine, we heard the devastating news that he had been shot to death in his own house. To this day, no one knows quite why that happened. And so we lost our chance to help him. But he only represents so many other young people who want to dedicate their lives to full-time ministry, but don't have the opportunity to do so because of finances, because of distance, because they get discouraged for one reason or the other. This is why we are preparing to go to Ukraine, to work with the Lviv Theological Seminary to provide leadership training and to develop distance education materials that will give opportunities for people all over the country to benefit from leadership training who wouldn't otherwise have access. The fruits of this mobilization can already be seen, and as more and more young Christians are dedicating themselves to church planting, to devising plans to meet the needs for the poor and oppressed, and even launching out into missions work themselves to the restricted access nations beyond the Ukraine. Ukraine has been called the breadbasket of Europe because a quarter of the black earth of the world is found within its borders. I believe that God is making Ukraine into a breadbasket of a different type, offering the bread of the gospel of the saving grace of Jesus Christ all over Eastern Europe and beyond. We want to be part of what God is doing in this part of the world. Our theme is Hold the Rope for Ukraine. How far are you willing to go to help someone else achieve their goal? If you would like to partner with us in prayer and by regular financial support, please download the appropriate documents on my website or contact us by the email address shown below. Whether you are able to give or not, please send us your address and we'll send you monthly updates. Thank you for your attention.